Ben Watts took his first mission trip in the summer of 2021 to Kenya with Imara International, whose mission was to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ through the education and nurturing of Kenyan teen moms and their children. Since then, Watts has taken countless other mission trips after discovering the love he has for the unseen. This is Conversations with Cade. Welcome to episode 3 of Conversations with Cade. I'm your host, CadeCracas, and today I'm joined by an Ashland University and Phi Kappa Psi graduate, Ben Watts, who spent a good chunk of his college career dedicating time and passion to other parts of the world. Ben, thank you for finally being able to sit down and join me here today.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm on the podcast game now.
I love it. It took us a little while to finally get this set up, but this is one that I really wanted to have because, Ben, my time with Phi Psi, you really made a big impact on me, and you've made a big impact on a lot of people around you. So for starters, do you want to give a bit of a background information on you?
Sure. For those that don't know, Cade and I both went to Ashland University together. He was 2 years behind me, and he ended up joining the same fraternity that I was in my senior year. So he only got a little dose of my madness, but I graduated Ashland, would have been last winter now, so December of 22. I was a political science major, and while I was in college and in my fraternity experience, I got really involved in African missions. After that, part of why it's been so difficult for a kid to get a hold of me is I am now running a production line for Kellogg's. So if you're eating any Pop-Tarts, there's a solid chance that they're coming from me.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. So, let's just jump right into it. What kind of got you to go to Ashland in the first place? Because that's kind of where this all started.
Well, what drew me to Ashland is I'm actually from central Pennsylvania. So I'm about 5 hours away from Ohio. So I had a high school teacher who was involved with the Ashbrook program at Ashland University. I knew that I wanted to go to school for something political, something of that nature. And I had a teacher who went there for her master's. She recommended a summer program to me that they have for high school students to get college credit before they go to school. And I was like, middle of nowhere, Ohio. Probably not going to end up going there when it is time for me to choose what school I go to. That's what I told myself going into it. But I went out there. I fell in love with the way that they teach at Ashland, and I guess 5 years later now, I find myself as a graduate from that very university.
That's a pretty crazy story. Especially considering, most people know Ashland's literally in the middle of nowhere. There's not much around it. It's dead smack in between Columbus and Cleveland, and it's pretty much just cornfields and a lot of Amish people. So to have that experience there, and you went from Ashland to Africa. So how did that all occur, and what really was the driving factor for you to decide, you know what, let's get out of our comfort zone here and let's go travel the world?
Well, I can tell you with 100% certainty that it was because of my fraternity experience with Phi Kappa Psi. I was, from a young age, I always had a passion for service. I was involved in scouting from elementary school all the way through high school. So I was surrounded with giving people from a young age. And I also just had a yearning to see the unseen, go and discover places that a lot of people in the United States haven't probably even thought of. So coupling those two passions together kind of naturally drew me to a desire for missions and humanitarian work. I actually ended up going to a leadership conference through Phi Kappa Psi my freshman year. We had chapter meeting the one night, and they were like, we need 2 volunteers to go to this leadership conference on spring break down in Orlando, Florida at Disney World. And I'm just thinking to myself, spring break paid for, Orlando? Hell yeah, count me in. So I volunteered to go, and little did I know, the spring break trip down there was going to be filled with nonstop conferences and leadership training the entire week. So not what a college kid would typically do on spring break, but I actually ended up finding my life's passion out of it. There was a speaker there who is also a brother of Phi Psi, Fred Hegley. And he wasn't even there to talk about humanitarian work or mission work, but I just heard him briefly mention in this panel speak that he was doing that he was involved with a mission group over in Kenya. And for some reason, it caught my attention. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy and find out more about that. Because at that point in my college career, your freshman year, you're starting to think about, hey, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do during my summers? You can take the internship route, work during the summer. So I knew that I wanted to travel. I had been considering study abroad at the time, but when I heard that he was involved with a mission group, I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. I actually ended up choking up the courage to go and talk to him in the hotel bar that night. And 3 hours later, I was pretty much partnered up with Imara International, and I knew what I was going to be doing for the future.
I mean that's such a crazy experience, and like you said, you were interested in study abroad and interested in trying to see the unseen. I mean, did you ever think that you'd be traveling in a mission trip format?
No, I really didn't. I did anticipate. I was determined to take advantage of my college experience to at least travel abroad once, but never in my wildest dreams did I foresee all of my experiences in my future. If you would have told me freshman year that I would have spent 2 summers 7,000 miles away from home alone, I would have told you were crazy.
And so when you had this meeting at the bar and you had this and you said 3 hours passed, and then next thing you know, you're pretty much set in stone to do this trip. I mean, what occurred during that 3 hour span that really locked you in and you were like, you know what? I've got to take this leap.
Well, initially we connected over the fact that we were both Eagle Scouts. And one thing that is in common between scouting and Phi Kappa Psi is their passion for service. So we immediately hit it off on that subject. We began usual pitter patter politics talk. We found that I think our worldviews aligned a lot. And when Fred mentioned how much his experience over there impacted his life, just how life changing it was, I don't think I grasped what it could do for me at the time, but I was incredibly attracted to the idea of having an experience like that for myself.
That's a really cool experience. And so after that first conversation, what occurred after that? I mean, did you then start talking to Amara International like you said? Did you immediately go back home and go, "Hey, well, looks like I'm headed to Africa for a little while," or kind of what was that like?
Well, interestingly enough, at this conference down in Florida, this was about a week before the COVID-19 pandemic started. To
Oh
give you a
wow.
little bit of reference, our school closed while we were in Florida, and the Ohio Department of Health contacted us and told us that we weren't allowed to fly home during this trip. Um, Hopefully, I'm okay to say this, but we did end up flying home. We pretty much told them, no, you're not quarantining us in the middle of Florida for God knows how long. But
I mean, I would not be a fan of that
yeah,
either.
we ended up flying home, but I wasn't in a position to travel that summer, so I actually ended up going and interning at Kellogg's that summer. But while I was doing that and throughout the next academic year, I ended up getting connected with everyone that works at Amara, and they put me on their marketing team and had me doing blog writing for them. So I just became over the next like year and a half or so, I just became very familiarized with the ins and outs of how the organization ran and what they were all about, which I think ultimately prepared me well for actually going over there in the flesh the next summer.
And so when you were able to intern with them and kind of learn the ins and outs of I guess the experience that you would be going into, did it start to when did it start settling in that you were like, "Oh wow, like I'm actually going to be doing this here soon?"
It I knew that I wanted to go over there. I had expressed to them that I really wanted to see it on the ground in action. From the get go, I fell in love with what their mission really was, which is spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ through the education and nurturing of Kenyan teen moms and their children. They they bring these mothers in who, for cultural and other reasons, have not been treated as any woman should, and we actually end up bringing them into our facility. They give birth at the facility, and then we educate them and their children. We educate the moms through primary school and teach them a lot about their faith and parenting and family skills. And then we educate their kids along the way. And the whole idea of this was very radical to me in a good way. I think I was just impressed at how impactful that sort of mission could be. I mean, I didn't truly understand it till I went over there, but it became very clear from the get go just how big of an impact that the organization was having on these women's lives.
And so you eventually finally were able to go on this trip. Would that have been your sophomore summer? Would it be your first trip?
Yes, it would have.
So all that sophomore year, were you kind of in preparation going, okay, I mean, I got to get through the school year, continue to work on my academics and all the things I do with my fraternity, and then I get to kind of go do this thing that I've been super excited about?
Well, in the fall, not really. I had been kind of torn between whether to go back to Kellogg's that summer or whether to try and do a study abroad or this. And I just remember sitting in my dorm room the one day and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to send the message. And I messaged the founder of the organization and I was like, hey, any chance I could get you on the phone? I have an idea that might sound a little crazy, but I think might interest you. So a little bit after that, we got on the phone talking, and I was like, would you guys be interested in having me come out there that summer? And in retrospect, I found out to them this did in fact sound crazy. I mean, they really only they only knew me through Fred and through the phone and a computer screen. They had never even met me in person, and they were they were inviting me they would be inviting me into a very vulnerable situation and a very intense one. So without them truly knowing me, they kind of took the leap and allowed me to go over there, which again in retrospect is kind of surprising, but God works in mysterious ways and I think throughout the whole process of getting me over there, it makes me think that God had to play a role because just so many things throughout the process of me finding out about them, me working for them for a little bit, and then me ending up going over there 2 years in a row. Everything just had to align and fall just right that it kind of had to be destiny.
And to kind of break this up real quick before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of these trips, I mean, are you a religious person as yourself?
It's interesting that you asked that because I was raised Christian, but at the time, I wouldn't consider myself as connected to my faith as I would have liked to be. I always tell people that I I went to Africa as a humanitarian and I left as a missionary because it really is over there on the ground that fell in love with my faith again, nurtured my faith again, and just allowed it to grow and prosper so much.
That's really cool to hear. And so now that we're going to kind of dive into things on the side of these mission trips that you went on, do you want to give us a little bit of some intro on kind of how you prepared for this trip? I mean, just a couple weeks leading up to it, you're heading into that sophomore summer, and you're getting ready to go. All right, it's time to go 7,000 miles away from home.
Oh yeah, they sent me a book of stuff that I needed to have done basically in a month and a half's time before I could get on the plane and go over there. And I just remember looking at it and I was like, "Holy shit, I've got some work to do." I mean, I had to I had to make sure that my passport was in order. You've got passports, visas, vaccinations, background checks. The packing alone was a nightmare because again I really didn't know what I was getting myself into entirely. So there was a lot of prep work beforehand. um, I remember the vaccinations. I think I had to get 3 or 4, even just to be allowed on the plane over there. And on
Oh,
top of that,
wow.
this was during COVID. So in order to travel internationally to a high risk country during that time, holy cow, it was stressful, but well worth it in the end.
And so, were you nervous at all about that? Because you talked about the vaccinations and how even during the COVID time, you had to go over there and get more vaccinations. I mean, was that all a concern at any point?
You'd think it would be, but the honest to God answer is I think I was just crazy enough for it not to phase me at all. I was so excited and determined at the idea of getting over there and having this out of this world experience that I was more just focused on getting it all done than I think actually wrapping my head around the fact of what I was really doing.
And now, a quick break from today's episode for a word from our sponsor. While Ben was traveling the world seeing new things, others may travel the world to see certain events or concerts. And SeatGeek can help you get the best bang for your buck. SeatGeek is an amazing app that helps you buy tickets in the easiest way possible. They grade seats based on the quality of where you are sitting and the price given, helping you find the best seats. So please, if you ever need to buy tickets to a sporting event, concert, or comedy show, use promo code CRACAS at checkout. That's CRACAS at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. Now, back to the episode. And then you get on that plane for the first time. You're in the airport. You're getting all set. I mean, what was that day like for you?
Um, I think it was a lot worse for my parents than it was for me. They were, I think they probably thought I was a little crazy at the time too. For all they knew, I would have showed up at the Kenya airport and been kidnapped right away. They never would have seen me again. But no, I did my best to kind of reassure them. And there were just so many unknowns that it was so difficult to tell what was to come. I actually was I in order for me to get the most out of the experience, I knew that I had to go in with zero expectations. And in doing that, the sky was the limit for me and what I could personally and professionally gain out of that trip. And I did that tenfold.
That's phenomenal to hear. I mean, that's the most important thing, and I feel like it's not talked about enough. But going into things with no expectations really does heighten the experience. And I want to go back to something you mentioned. I think just a question or two ago. You said your parents. I mean, what was their thought process when you even approached to them with this idea?
Well, I think they were constantly asking for more information that I didn't really have. Now, Amara did a great job of preparing me up front for kind of what I needed, baseline, what I should expect out of this experience. But until you actually do it, it was very difficult for me to explain to my parents that I was going to be safe over there, that I was going to be looked after, that they didn't really have cause for concern outside of their son traveling 7,000 miles around the world alone. But so I think naturally they were internally panicked a little bit, but they held face pretty well. We stayed in contact, and I don't think that they regret sending me over there. That is for sure.
And so now that we've gotten that part established and down, and we know that your parents did think you're a little bit crazy at the time, what was the actual experience like? So you get there, you finally settle in, you're off the plane. What happened from there?
I just remember, and I think anyone that's traveled abroad can kind of relate to this a little bit. There is that culture shock adjustment when you first get there. And I just remember the whole first week was I was kind of just in shock and awe at how different it is from the United States. Um, Everything is faster paced over there. It's faster paced, but it's slower paced. They call it pole pole time over there, which kind of means slow, slow. And if someone were to tell you, like, oh, something starts at 10 o'clock, you may as well expect that it's going to start at noon. Um, we are a So everything over there moves at a very fast pace, but all of the people are very laid back, relaxed. Time and schedules, they don't matter as much. Visually, everything is so much more vibrant and exuberant in nature. And I just think it's going to take a while for you to adjust to that. So there was that adjustment period, and everything after that was truly just life changing. And you hear that in a naive way, or I guess cliche way, all the
Yeah.
time. Like, oh, this experience was life changing. But in an earth shattering way, it really was for me. And I can't place enough weight and magnitude on how much I mean life changing, because when you experience the things that I did over there, there's no turning back. I mean, I remember coming home, you look at everything differently, you adjust back to the way that America does things. I can tell you right now, every time that I leave the lights on, I think twice now. Every time that I brush my teeth, I sure as hell don't take clean water for granted. There's just so many things that I drew from that experience that led me to appreciate what we have at home here a lot more.
And so, what were some key things? I mean, you talked about some of the things there with the lights and the water. I mean, what were those experiences though that made you think twice about those? Like, what did you see firsthand that made you go, "Wow, I got to start appreciating things more"?
For starters, to put it into perspective for people, like if you were to go out and buy a new car today, some families of four in Africa live off of that for a decade. How much that new car costs. Everything is everything that we have here. I don't think we realized how privileged that we are to have it. So a lot of the realization for me in being there and being here comes in the privileges that we do have. Being able to sleep with your doors unlocked at night, being able to have that constant sense of security and peace of mind, not having to have your head on a swivel when you're out in public. Those are things that when you're traveling abroad and in an impoverished area like I was, you always have to be alert. And just being able to be here and let your guard down makes me realize how fortunate we are to live in a country that kind of allows us that sense of security, safety, peace of mind all the time. I don't know if that answers the question, but for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways, just the little things.
Yeah, and when you talk about that sense of security and safety, did you ever have any instances where you were genuinely kind of concerned about your safety and security?
Several over my 2 years. I think one of the most profound ones was my first year that I was over in Kenya. I was my boss had gone back to the states to fundraise, so I was living alone for I think 4 weeks or so. So every day I would walk probably a mile or so to the road to catch the taxi. They're called matatus, and this is not a taxi or a bus or a school bus like you'd think. Think of one of those like white or navy vans that you took field trips on in high school. It's like one of those, but with wooden boards for seats, and they cram as many people in them as humanly possible. So sometimes we're in these little vans scurrying down the road for 50 cents a ride, with like 24 people in the van. And I would take this to work, down to the school that I was working at, and I would take it home. And I remember on the ride home the one day, I had the Imara staff, which was made up of like 8 or 9 beautiful, wonderful ladies that were tasked with keeping me safe while I was over there. God bless them because they did a fantastic job of it, or I wouldn't be talking to you today. But Mzungu means white person in Swahili. And I just remember I was not at all proficient in Swahili at the time. And we were on the ride home, and the two drivers of this taxi kind of just started talking to me in Swahili, and I could really not understand most of what they were saying. But the ladies next to me said that they were trying to demand a Mzungu tax from me, which meant a white tax. So they wanted me to pay more for my taxi ride than everyone else was. And more or less, I could have been kidnapped in that situation, but because I had those ladies with me there that were keeping me safe, I did make it home. But to find out after the fact that, hey, they wanted to take you somewhere that you didn't want to go, and I didn't even really know it at the time. That was a little scary.
And you talked about it before a little bit though, that like it made you start to appreciate things more. And in that sense, mentally, how does those situations change you from where you are there and then to where you are now?
Goodness, I think it from from where I was there to where I'm at now. I think it I think it leads you to strengthen up a little bit and to be more alert. I think it again fed into that appreciation for the things that we do have here in the States. But I think overall, it was just a general peace of mind that when I'm here, I don't have to worry about those things.
Yeah. And so then while you're over there, what's kind of the work that you're doing? I don't think we've really got into that too much. I mean, what's an average day like for you when it comes to your actual service side of things and actually trying to help better the community over there?
Oh, yeah. Um, Speaking Kenya wise, it would be wake up bright and early, make it to the school, and I was pretty much there to aid the teachers in whatever they needed. I taught a lot of classes myself, and to really just aid in the development of these Kenyan teen moms and their kids. So I spent time in the preschool classroom. I was teaching English, social studies, life skills. I was never a math guy, so I tried to steer clear of that. But I spent most of my day teaching. We would do religious education every day, so like a reading of devotionals, and there would be spiritual and faith based development of the moms and their kids. So it was a busy day, and then we'd always close it out with a game of intense soccer. So I would usually I would usually limp my way home with bruised ankles, but feeling incredibly fulfilled that I did something worthy that day.
And these people that you worked with, I mean, what's their backgrounds? What's their stories? What's their situations? And how did those impact you?
Well, in a lot of cases, the moms are victims of sexual assault. So naturally, going in that the women that are there, they have been through a lot. And in coming there, you see that they have a desire to be better for themselves, to be better for their kids, and to give their children a better life than they've had to that point. So it really is inspiring. And as all educators can probably relate to, I loved education specifically because you could tangibly see the growth and the impact that you were having. You know, helping someone with a subject that they struggled in and seeing them grow to excel in it, seeing them become better mothers to their children and them grow in their faith. Every day I was seeing the progress and the impact that I was making, and I don't think that is as physically seen in all forms of service. So to be able to actually see what I was doing was incredible, and I think it made me have a real desire for more.
And would you say more is in the sense of more in life in general or more in a sort of emotional and mental sense?
Mm, I think both. I mean, the best way to explain it is I think that you can grow physically, so you can grow taller. You can grow mentally and have that fortitude of mind that a lot of people desire, but I think that spiritual growth spiritual growth has a very weird feeling, and it's almost like that tingly butterfly feeling in your stomach that just makes you feel good and fulfilled. And I just remember walking home from work every day feeling that, and I was like, this feels better than money can buy. This I may not have been making six figures over there or even minimum wage or anything for that matter, but the way that I felt walking home from work every day was worth a lot more than any form of money could give me. It was a different feeling, but in my opinion, a better one. And it just made me want more service and more opportunities to give back. The growth
And
that I experienced is just out of this world.
I love that message. I think that's something that's not talked about often, or it's at least attempted to be talked about, but it's shut down fairly quickly about the money side of things and how you really got that feeling of satisfaction from everything else outside of the money, and that and you realize that really isn't a big factor in determining your happiness. And so you leaving this place and coming back to the United States, was there a culture shock there? And how did that translate into your life in the fraternity and back at Ashland University?
It most certainly was culture shock. I actually found myself resenting the way that we do things here a little bit. Everything seems so survival of the fittest, self interested, just almost like a pit of lions fighting to be the last one standing. And in a way, that is kind of what the American dream is. I mean, hard work gets you to the top, and you have to claw your way to get there to have that prosperous life. Um, and I do think that sadly these days America has gotten away from family and community a little bit. So to see just how juxtaposed the way that we do things here was from over there, it kind of made me be like, why can't we be like them? I feel like we'd be a lot happier. And everything here is all about, you know, we go through high school and we're like, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a pro athlete. And it makes me think to myself, why is it that we are drawn so much to these professions? And I think we can all admit that at least a portion of it is because these guys make a lot of money. And it kind of correlates that here it seems like the amount of money that you make is a lot of times linked to how much happiness and security that you have, because money is survival. But over there, it's completely different because very seldom do people have a lot of money. Certainly, barely any have what we would consider a lot of money. So people lean on their faith and their neighbors a lot more. So I think coming back here, it it made me want to allow other people to see that, to share my story, to show that this kind of experience can radically change the way that you see the world and what it truly means to have a good life. And I just wanted other people to hear my story and maybe be drawn to have a similar experience that I did. It made me want what I had for other people.
And when you came back to the United States, what were some ways that you decided, I want to be proactive and I want to try to get this into the minds of others? And even though they may not be able to go over to Africa and experience what I experienced, what conversations did you have? What things did you try to put in place that would help others understand and start to appreciate where they lived much more?
Well, I did quite a few things, specifically tied in with Amara. One of the things that they lacked over there was a good number of literacy materials. All of the girls are learning English over there all the time, and I just saw that they didn't have a lot. They didn't have enough kids books and other books to help them in their development of English learning. So I thought to myself, maybe one way to get my campus involved, to spread the word and hear the story of what I did, would be to start a book drive. So the fall after I came back, we did a book drive with all of my fraternity brothers and through friends on campus. And I think probably we ended up with thousands of dollars worth of school supplies, books, literacy material that I'm still in the process today of getting over there. That is how much we got from it. So I think people were able to they were able to see my passion in it through that campaign, and I think it ended up transferring on to them. They got excited about it. They got passionate about it. And then just especially through fraternity networks and through campus networks, spreading my story was the best way to do it, because I think when they saw how passionate I was about it, when they heard about what we were doing over there in tandem, they got excited about it. So to be able to spread the word and tell my story, I think got a lot of other people both interested in what we do over there and interested in this, I guess, obscure way of life.
And so even outside of your mission of your trip to Africa, you still came back and you still tried to make waves and strides to help them better them over from across the country, across the world. And so did that still give you a sense of fulfillment as well, like being able to do these book drives and sort of find other ways that even when you're not there, you can still find ways to help them?
Oh, absolutely. It was the same sense of fulfillment. We even ended up, um, our US director of operations and my boss actually ended up coming to campus and speaking at the fraternity house. And we had people from all over campus that came just to listen to them speak about what we do over there. And they gave a whole presentation to everyone. So I think it was just all in all a an experience where I could impart some of my positive experience onto others.
And so, as we start to round the curve towards the end of this episode, another big topic that we have to cover real quick is what was the difference between your first trip to Africa and your second trip?
Well, definitely a big one. I mean, setup wise, the first time that I went over there, I there was one very generous person. Fred helped me out big time in getting over there the first time. So if he ends up listening to this, thank you very much, Fred. And the second time I was like, okay, I want to take this bigger scale. And my second summer, I ended up doing two countries rather than one. I was on Zanzibar Island teaching at another school there. So it was larger scale, and I set up an entire fundraising network. Pretty much anyone that I knew, that anyone that had an impact on me in my life was put onto a list. I started doing newsletters that I'd send out throughout the year, and I did a whole fundraising campaign for my trip the second summer. And my second summer, I ended up having all of my expenses paid for to go over there and do two countries, and I did two, I funded two full charity drives in the process of that. In Zanzibar, we ended up buying backpacks, school supplies, and shoes for a school of like 85 children. And then
Wow.
when I went back to Imara later that summer, we ended up buying them some eco friendly kitchen equipment because the price of fuel rose so much over there that they began to have a harder time putting food on the table for the moms and their kids. So we were able to get them the equipment that they needed to keep everybody fed. And that was all from grassroots people, friends and family, fraternity brothers, people on campus chipping in to get me over there and do all of this for them. So there were so many more people involved the second time that I went over there. It just became a much larger scale portion of charity and being able to do good for other people. And I loved every second of it.
And that kind of brings me to a point that you talked about earlier, and that the biggest difference, and you sort of had that resentment coming back to the United States and how things felt much more selfish over here. And when you talked about this second trip you went on, you talked about how people were being selfless and helping you to get back over there. They were donating, they were helping in any sort of way that they could. Did that sort of kind of give you a healing of the heart in a sense of maybe that it's just certain areas that need this, or maybe there's certain situations that help bring that selflessness out in people?
It absolutely did. That's a great way to describe it. I think the second time around, it was clear to me that my message was getting around, and that people were selfless, and that they were interested in what I was doing. And maybe resentment wasn't the best word to describe it. I think I was more just concerned. I think that would be a better word. But
Yeah.
to see everybody kind of rally behind what I was doing, it made me feel incredibly grateful, and it gave me the tools that I needed to really embrace the change that I wanted to see. And overall, I stay in touch with all of these people to this day and thank them often for what they did for me. And at this point, it's more a process of, hey, how am I going to continue this? What's the next step? How am I going to get back there? And just to see everyone else, I guess, just kind of join the team. That was very heartening to see.
And if you had to kind of devolve and talk about some things that you still have now that you had when you went on those trips, and some things that you learned and some things that you're going to keep with you for the rest of your life, what would some of those things be?
For starters, as I've already mentioned, just the privileges that we have here. I think that we live in very divided times. We can agree on that. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in politics and stress and work that we need to take a step back and thank those that have given us a country in which we can feel safe and that we don't have to worry about putting food on the table a lot, and just the privileges that we have here, because in all reality it really could be worse. And I think until you see how the other side lives, for lack of a better term, you can't truly grasp that concept, which is why, into my next point, it kind of drives me to urge people to take this experience if you have it. Um, Anybody that travels abroad and gets involved in mission and humanitarian work frequently brings back a lot of the same life changing things that I brought back. So I encourage everybody to give it a shot if they want to. You're never too young, you're never too old. The amount of impact that you're able to give rests entirely on what you make out of it. Everybody will bring back something different, and I just urge everyone, if they have the opportunity to get involved in service like this, to take it. And it doesn't even have to be internationally. There is a lot of work in this country that can be done to help those that are in need.
And if you had to thank certain people, you can go ahead and do so right now.
Oh, well, I'd like to thank Fred Hegley, Carol Erickson, who is the founder of Imara, for getting me over there. Everyone that aided me in my journey over to Africa, you know who you are. There were a lot of people that got involved, whether it was prayers that you were sending or you financially contributed. You are what made that trip happen, both of those trips. Obviously, my parents for giving me a place to sleep and never giving up on my far fetched idea that I could travel alone and change the world, which I like to think I at least contributed to. Um, Definitely my fraternity brothers. Without their support, there's no way that any of this happens. Everyone at the Ashbrook program as well. They showed me how you truly educate someone and teach them how to think and not what to think. And they played a big part in getting me over there as well. And of course, CadeCracas for having me on his podcast and keeping this good message able to be spread.
And Ben, I got to thank you for coming on here because it's an important thing, and there's a big reason why I wanted you to come on this podcast and spread this story and keep it going. Because outside of your Ashland University time, you're now a graduate. There's still opportunities and abilities that you can use to keep spreading this message and inspiring others. And at the end of the day, that's the important factor here, is to carry on that sort of legacy and continue to make people go over there and get those experiences and learn and grow as a human being, and to understand that what we have here can be different from what people have across the world and even across the country. And so I really do thank you for coming on here today, Ben.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Well, if you want to continue to follow on with Ben's story, I mean, Ben, how can they follow you on social media?
Oh goodness, I'm not on social media as much as other people my age, but Ben Watts 52 on Instagram. You can probably find my Snapchat through some channels. Shoot me an email at bwravens@gmail.com. If you can find me, I'm happy to talk to anyone about it, especially if they've got questions about my experience or want to know how to get involved. Um, I think we could all spread the love a little bit more. This world needs a lot more love.
And if you want to keep in contact with Ben, you can do so. You can just rewind just a couple seconds ago and hear what he had to say. You can also head over to the Phi Kappa Psi Foundation YouTube channel and go watch his 4-minute and 43-second story there. A much shorter rendition than this episode here today, but that's all we have for episode 3 of Conversations with Cade.